Please answer.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
Please, Emanuel Church, there's plenty people shot down here. Please send somebody right away. Shot the pastor, he shot all the men in the church. Please come right away.
Okay, my partner's going to be getting some help on the way while I get a little bit more information from you, okay? Stay on the line with me.
He's still in here, I'm afraid. He's still in here. He's coming, please.
Okay, ma'am, are you able to, if he's coming, I need you to be as quiet as possible. Is there something that you can hide under?
I'm under the table.
And where are the weapons now?
He's got it in his hand. He's reloading. God, please help me.
On June 17, 2015, members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church Emanuel, located in Charleston, were preparing for the Bible study moment, as they did every Wednesday. That was a church comprised solely of African Americans. However, this day would become the scene of one of the most cowardly acts of racial hatred in modern American history. Who arrived at the location now was a 21-year-old white man. His name was Dylann Roof. Instead of being criticized or expelled, he was invited to participate in the group that seemed happy to share their faith with one more person. For an hour, Dylann sat among them, feigning interest in the Word of God. When everyone closed their eyes to pray, he revealed his true intention: murdering 9 people with gunshots, exchanging prayer for gunpowder, blood and screams, abusing the trust and welcome of the members of that church in order to execute his terrible and cowardly plan. Dylann was born on April 3, 1994, in South Carolina, United States. His father, Franklin Bennett Roof, worked in carpentry and construction, while his mother, Amelia Cowles, worked as a bartender. During pregnancy, the couple divorced, but resumed their relationship in time for Dylann's birth. By the age of 5, his parents had already divorced again. Dylann moved constantly, living time with his father and then time with his mother. This caused him to go through at least 7 different schools, being unable to form lasting bonds. Dylann was a reserved, polite child, and despite never initiating a conversation, responded well when a colleague approached. This earned him a few friends, who, over the years, did not sustain that friendship, since the effort came from only one side. But would just a difficult childhood be enough to create a monster? What happened to transform a lonely child into a mass murderer? The boy exhibited early signs of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, causing him to wash his hands very frequently, in addition to using a large amount of hand sanitizer daily. This earned him some jokes and teasing at school that didn't seem to bother him. There is no record made by Dylann about traumatic bullying in school. Additionally, the boy also had a preference for this haircut that he always maintained throughout time. In 2005, his father gained full custody, taking his son to live with him in Colombia. During the next 3 years, Dylann did not attend school for unknown reasons, which apparently made a big difference in his life. His father divorced again, returning with the boy to South Carolina. Franklin alleged that his wife was unfaithful, revealing that he had discovered this through a private detective. Paige, for her part, claimed to suffer aggression from her husband and therefore initiated the divorce. Either way, Dylann now resumed his studies at White Knoll High School. Having been away from school for so long and with a troubled childhood, full of changes and always being the new kid without friends, Dylann encountered many problems. He now skipped classes frequently, spending his time with intense use of alcoholic beverages and drugs, especially marijuana use. The sum of all this caused the boy to fail that year. Again, he was sent to a new school, Dreher High School. But things only got worse. His class attendance decreased even more until he dropped out of school. One of his uncles tried to alert Dylann's parents, saying that behavior was not appropriate. He even tried to be a mentor to the boy and help him design a promising future. Unfortunately, Dylann refused, completely ending the relationship between the two. In 2011, Dylann returned to school online, but was also unable to maintain the necessary attendance. Unable to finish high school, he resorted to the GAD. It was the most he could achieve as advancement in his academic career. After obtaining the certificate, he was forced by his father to work at a company providing services such as cutting grass and eliminating insects and pests in gardens. All the money he received was spent on alcohol and marijuana. Dylann now spent all his free time locked in his room, playing games and browsing the internet. Until then, he showed no signs of hatred or revolt. He was just a young man facing some problems while making the transition to adult life. Up to that point, Dylann had not been involved in any fights, and none of his friends or colleagues saw him as a possible threat to society. However, this would change in 2012. On February 26, 2012, Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old young man, was returning home when he was spotted by George Zimmerman. Zimmerman lived in a condominium that had recently been the victim of burglary, so residents were on high alert. The man found the boy's behavior suspicious and called the police. When officers arrived, Trayvon was already dead. George was responsible for shooting the unarmed Trayvon, who died at the scene. The man was taken to the police station and released 5 hours later, claiming self-defense. The following year, he was charged with this homicide but was acquitted at his trial. After this decision, a series of protests were held calling for justice for Trayvon's death. This obviously brought to light a discussion about racism, making Dylann curious and researching more about the case. While millions protested for justice, Dylann Roof took a dark path. Alone in his room, he began consuming extremist content online, feeding a hatred that grew day by day. Dylann revealed to the FBI that he began researching crimes between whites and blacks. He chose to side with George, saying the man had done nothing wrong. Visiting questionable sites with unconfirmed or unofficial information, Dylann developed extremely racist and prejudiced thoughts. With no plan for the future and plenty of free time, he now increasingly fed his hatred, isolated inside that room. For the next few years, Dylann immersed himself in content about white supremacy, a subject he couldn't share with his family and friends, since no one agreed with his point of view. Dylann then found a place where he shared his repulsive and criminal ideas with other people like him, in forums and websites on the internet. One of these blogs where Dylann was quite active was the Daily Stormer, a blog that was removed from the internet by the FBI in 2017, after the investigation carried out due to the attack. The nickname he used on this site was Blood14088, a direct reference to what he defended and believed. His topics and comments on this blog were full of racism and hate speech, all published in the midst of a neighborhood with many African Americans. His manifesto, he wrote, was not much different. It was 5 pages of terrible and impulsive ideas that made very clear the motivation that would make him act. As we will see later in the interrogation, Dylann says he acted alone and that he was never part of any group officially. The FBI also found no evidence that he received any kind of help to carry out the attack, despite his online contact with other subjects with similar thoughts. Cow workers noticed that Dylann had the strange behavior of keeping as far away from others as possible. In a brief conversation, one of them asked the young man what he did in his free time. Dylann replied that he just stayed in his room looking at the walls. Video games, relationships, and sports were completely forgotten, as he was totally obsessed with his new ideology that he couldn't share with anyone. Immersed in delusions and without any ambition for the future, Dylann decided he wanted to do something beyond typing on his computer. On December 22, 2014, he traveled 18.6 kilometers to Charleston to visit the Boone Hall Plantation, founded and as one of the oldest plantations in America still in operation. From there, he went to the African Methodist Episcopal Church Emanuel, also known as Mother Emanuel. He remained at this location for approximately 7 minutes before returning home. It is one of the oldest churches in the United States with predominantly African American members. On February 23, 2015, at approximately 7:43 p.m., he made a call to this church, but the content of that conversation was never revealed to the public. Attacking a location with historical context like that could cause everything he sought: to start a racial war. Later, the FBI found a list of possible targets created by Dylann himself. His goal was to murder as many African Americans as possible, especially men. And since he was a coward and afraid of being arrested, his final plan was to take his own life. Everything was very well premeditated, and today we know he achieved neither. The next day, he traveled again toward the church, but returned without approaching the location. 3 days later, he went to Charleston again, visited a magnolia plantation, heading to the church at 10 p.m. This time, he remained there for 2 hours before returning home. Although it wasn't in his plans to be arrested, all these various trips would work against a possible plea of insanity in the future, even though he used visits to historical sites as an excuse to go there. First incident. On February 28, 2015, Dylann had his first encounter with the police. Dressed all in black, he was seen at the Columbiana Center Mall, asking employees many strange questions, such as what hours they worked, among other personal questions. That suspicious behavior caused one of the employees to call the police, who arrived at the scene and confronted Dylann. After a search, they found several Suboxone strips, a medication used to treat opioid dependence, and can only be acquired with the presentation of a prescription. Dylann didn't have a valid prescription and was taken to the police station. Due to a bureaucratic error, he was not charged with illegal drug possession, despite being unable to return to the vicinity of the mall. If this charge had gone on his record, Dylann wouldn't have been eligible to purchase a firearm for being an illegal user or dependent on a controlled substance. This error, unfortunately, cost 9 lives. Second incident. On March 13, 2015, he was seen again near the mall. When recognized by an off-duty police officer, he was questioned once more. In his car, officers found an attachment piece for an AR-15 rifle and 6 empty magazines. Dylann informed them he wanted to buy that weapon but didn't have the money. In South Carolina, carrying these items wasn't against the law, preventing Dylann from being arrested. However, his recurring suspicious behavior should have been enough for a more serious investigation by the police. But this unfortunately didn't happen. There was a problem in his way: how to get a weapon. The following month, Dylann received money as a birthday gift from his father, the last piece missing in his plan. On April 11th, 2015, he went to a gun store to legally purchase a Glock Model 41 caliber. By federal law, the FBI has up to 3 business days to determine if there is sufficient evidence to deny the sale of firearms to an individual. After signaling the desire to buy the weapon, the subject can return to the store on the 4th day to make the purchase. If the FBI hasn't given a response, or has granted permission, the agent responsible for this verification was probably unable to find any restrictions on Dylann's criminal record, which didn't include illegal possession of a controlled substance, allowing the man to return to pick up his weapon 4 days later. On April 26, 2015, Dylann was seen again near the mall, violating the restriction imposed by law. He was then taken to the police station, receiving a 3-year extension on his mall ban. For the next few days, he continued traveling to visit various plantations in Charleston, always passing by the church and analyzing the location before returning home. Final preparations. Dylann created a Facebook account in an attempt to find some school friends. One of them was Joseph Meek. The duo got along very well, sharing the same activities like alcohol consumption, drugs, and video games. Dylann quit his job and went to live for a while with his friend, where they spent every day in the same way. There he met a friend of Joseph who also shared the same lifestyle. One day, Dylann commented to his friends about the idea of carrying out a massacre at the University of Charleston. But when pressed, he remained silent, making it seem like he had let a secret slip. Later, when they were alone, Joseph asked Dylann about the massacre. He then told his plan, saying he would actually attack a church. Unfortunately, Joseph didn't take the case to the police, and the next time he would see him would be on a police poster asking for someone to help identify the suspect for the murder of 9 people. The day of the massacre. On June 17, 2015, some members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church Emanuel were meeting for Bible study. It was an ordinary Wednesday at Mother Emanuel. That day, in addition to the church pastor, many longtime members with important positions were at the location. This may indicate that all of Dylann's visits served to choose that date, targeting active and fundamental members for the church's daily life. While everyone arrived and prepared for Bible study, an unknown car arrived at the location, parking very close to one of the entrances. And who would get out of the vehicle was Dylann Roof. Lost in his extremist and racist thoughts, he adjusted the holster where his ammunition and pistol were before opening the door. Gaining access to the location, Dylann entered still posing as a visitor. Even though he wasn't African American, he was welcomed with open arms by the group. who wouldn't miss the opportunity to share that moment with one more person. Bible study began. Dylann waited until everyone was accustomed to his presence. What the church members didn't know, however, was that among them was a coward. As soon as everyone closed their eyes for the moment of prayer, Dylann drew his pistol, firing several times at Clementa C. Pinckney, 41 years old, who didn't survive the injuries and died at the scene. The sound of gunfire made some members run under the tables while trying to understand what was happening. During a brief moment of silence, while the shooter reloaded his pistol, Daniel Simmons, 74 years old, stood up saying he needed to find the pastor. In response, Dylann shot the man 6 times, leading Daniel to death. To prevent other people from getting up, the shooter continued walking through the church and shooting under the tables. Multiple people were hit and bled to death, embraced in that church. All the welcome and affection received by Dylann was now answered with shots, blood and screams. Polly Shepard was praying aloud under a table when she saw Dylann's boots approaching. Seeing the kneeling woman, he said, "Shut up, have I shot you yet? Not yet, and I won't. You'll stay alive to tell the story." Tywanza Sanders, 26 years old, stood up upon hearing this, begging the shooter to stop. That was an attempt to bring Dylann to reality, but unfortunately he had already gone too far in his thoughts. Dylann said they were guilty of raping white women and taking over the nation. "Why are you doing this? We didn't do anything to you," said Tywanza Sanders. Dylann, in response, fired multiple times, leading the man to death. As soon as the shooter moved away, Polly called the police.
Please answer.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
Please, Emanuel Church is plenty people shot down here. Please send somebody right away.
Emanuel Church?
Emanuel, Amy, 110 Calhoun.
And there's people shot?
Yeah, he shot the pastor. He shot all the men in the church. Please come right away.
Okay, my partner's going to be getting some help on the way while I get a little bit more information from you, okay? Stay on the line with me. Are you safe?
He's still in here, I'm afraid. He's still in here.
Dylann continued shooting randomly while waiting for the police to arrive. With the tragedy already committed and in the last stage of his plan, the criminal was prepared to take his own life. However, without realizing it, he had already spent all his ammunition, being the final shot to end his attack. He left the church, getting back in the car and fleeing the scene. In total, 9 people were killed, and 1 was injured. Clementa C. Pinckney, 41 years old. Daniel Simmons, 74 years old. Tywanza Sanders, 26 years old. Cynthia Hurd, 54 years old. Sharonda Coleman Singleton, 45 years old. Myra Thompson, 59 years old. Ethel Lee Lance, 70 years old. DePayne Middleton Doctor, 49 years old. Susie Jackson, 87 years old. Each victim had a story, a family, a legacy, all silenced by the intolerance of a coward. Felicia Sanders and her 5-year-old granddaughter survived by pretending to be dead, covered with the victim's blood. During the interrogation, we can get a better sense of Dylann's thinking. The shooter is seated on the right, wearing a white t-shirt. During the audio transcripts of the interrogation, Dylann recounts the events as if describing a routine event.
Whoa. Yeah, I mean, I went to that church in Charleston, and, I did it.
You did what? Well, I know stuff sometimes to say.
It's not that I don't want to say it because I don't want to make myself seem guilty. I just don't really like saying it.
I know sometimes we have to face those things, the realities.
We don't want to put any words in your mouth. That's why.
Right.
That's why Agent Stansbury just asking you what it exactly is that you did do.
Well, I killed him. Well, I guess. I mean, I don't really know. I don't know how many people or anything like that.
So did you shoot him?
Yes.
What kind of gun did you use?
A Glock 45.
Okay. Was that your gun or?
Yes, I bought it from the gun store. Anyway, they saw it, but I sat down because I guess they just didn't say anything. And then I was sitting there and I was like, just thinking about whether I should do it or not. And that's why I was sitting there for 15 minutes, just like, because I know I could have just walked out, because they didn't say anything to me about what, thinking about. So I could have walked out, and that's what I was just thinking, But then I just, know, it's like, not, I want to say spur of the moment, but, you know, I just finally decided I had to do it. And that's pretty much it.
Well, that goes to the next question. Why did you have to do it?
Oh, I had to do it.
How come? I mean, that's what I don't know. I mean,
Well, I had to do it because somebody had to do something.
Completely oblivious to the fact that he destroyed several families forever, the investigators choose to ignore Dylann's laughter, which is not an easy task. All this lack of empathy may indicate traits of antisocial personality disorder, although he has not been officially diagnosed. By verbalizing to investigators that he had been to the location before the attack to collect information, Dylann adds another point that makes it clear this was a planned act. This information will be responsible for significantly increasing his sentence. The most important part of the entire interrogation wasn't the doubts about who was the perpetrator of the shots or the weapon used. The police already knew it was Dylann because of all the evidence. All they needed to discover was the motive, and this could also directly impact the shooter's future. During the trial, Dylann showed no remorse or any kind of sympathy for the victims' families. Dylann Roof was found guilty of hate crime, resulting in death, hate crime with intent to kill, obstructing religious exercises, and resulting in death, obstructing religious exercises with intent to kill, obstructing religious exercises with intent to kill, using a weapon, use of firearm during violent crime, resulting in death of 9 premeditated homicides, 3 attempted premeditated homicides, possession of firearm during execution of violent crime. For this entire list, he was sentenced to death plus 9 consecutive life imprisonments, to be served consecutively, without the possibility of parole. In 2016, inside a custody cell, Dylann was being supervised by 2 officers. During one's break, the other officer was called to perform a task, opening a window of time in which Dylann was left unsupervised. At the same moment, another inmate escaped from his cell, which for some unknown reason was not locked. The prisoner was able to pass through a metal door, go down the stairs, and invade Dylann's cell. Now unarmed, he no longer seemed ready to participate in the war he talked so much about. The prisoner in front of him was Daquan Stafford. He was awaiting trial for armed assault and robbery. With punches and kicks, he was able to leave strong marks on Dylann's face and throughout his body. Despite the injuries, the unit's doctors understood that none of them were serious, allowing Dylann to return to his cell. He stated he would not file a complaint about the beating he had received. The following night, the bail of more than $100,000 was paid anonymously, allowing Daquan to receive his freedom. Current situation. Since January 2020, Dylann has been filing appeals for the removal of his death sentence. All requests to date have been denied. His lawyers used the argument that the criminal is too disconnected from reality, trying to base the defense on some disorder or mental illness. However, all attempts were frustrated. Dylann fired his lawyers, refusing to pass as mentally ill. The case is in the Supreme Court to decide whether or not he can represent himself in possible future hearings. Now in 2025, at 31 years old, Dylann is on death row while awaiting his execution at the Terre Federal Maximum Security Penitentiary in Indiana. Mother Emanuel reopened its doors days after the massacre, where hatred spilled blood, love rebuilt hope. The pews where 9 people prayed for the last time continue to be occupied every Sunday. If Dylann Roof wanted to be remembered, he will be, as the personification of cowardice, irrational hatred, and how evil can grow in isolation and online extremism. But the victims, they will be remembered as they were in life, people of faith, of love, who opened their doors, their hearts and their arms to those who came to destroy them. In memory of Clementa Pinckney, Cynthia Hurd, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lance, DePayne Middleton Dr., Tywanza Sanders, Daniel Simmons, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Myra Thompson,